Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. As India balances its interests in a world increasingly divided over not one but two wars now, the Modi government is facing another big challenge. A lower court in Qatar on Thursday announced a death penalty to 8 former Indian Navy personnel in an espionage case. These 8 ex-Indian Navy officials have been accused by Qatar of spying for Israel. But the situation is not as simple as just that. The proceedings of the case are confidential and the charges against them have not really been made public by the Qatari government. Even the Indian government is being very careful about talking details in this matter. Thus, the facts or more details are unclear at this stage. The veterans were working for a private firm that provided training and related services to Qatar's armed forces. Qatari officials detained them last year in September along with the owner of the company that they were working in. The owner was released in 2 months, but the 8 former Indian officials continued to remain for many months even in solitary confinement. The central government has long maintained that it was exploring legal channels to ensure the release of the arrested personnel. Now that this death sentence has been announced, a decision that has shocked the Indian state, what is it that India can truly do to save these former 8 Navy officials' lives and provide them at least with the best possible defense? We'll take that question to our guest joining us in just a bit. But first, let me take you through the details about what these former Navy officials were doing in Qatar. So as I mentioned, these 8 personnel were working at a defense services provider company called Dahra Global, and most of them were actually in leadership positions, not really low positions. The company is owned or was owned by an Omani national named Khamis Al-Ajmi, who himself is a retired squadron leader of the Royal Oman Air Force. Now, according to the company's old website, Al-Dahra gave logistical, maintenance and training services to Qatari Emiri Naval Force. But there is no mention of that aspect or the ex-Indian Navy officials working for them in their new website. Al-Dahra's owner was also arrested, as I mentioned, in Qatar in September last year, when the gentleman actually went to Qatar from Oman to try and secure the release of his workers. But he was arrested as well, only to be released 2 months later in November 2022. Now that was not something that the Indian officials got. Right after the verdict was announced, the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement. Let me take you through most of it. They've said they're deeply shocked by the verdict and death penalty of the ex-Indian Navy personnel. We will take this verdict up with Qatari authorities, is what the Indian MEA has said, that they are in touch with the family members of the arrested personnel and their legal teams, that India is exploring all legal options available. What those could be, I'll get to that in just a bit. But that MEA will continue to extend all consular and legal assistance to these individuals. They asserted that due to the confidential nature of the proceedings of the case, it would not be appropriate to make further comments. The Indian government and the ministry also being extremely careful. Let's take a look at the possible options that India has here, because mind you, this is a lower court ruling as it stands. It needs to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court, so it's not a final verdict by any means. The Indian agencies have the option of appealing against this verdict before a higher court in Qatar, possibly eventually even an international court. India is also likely to seek frequent consular access to the arrested personnel. India is also looking to extend more legal assistance to the family members on behalf of whom cases can be fought. And back channel diplomacy, this is where it will take center stage. What are the back channel diplomacy issues that we can take up along with legal aid that India can explore? And this is going to be perhaps where the most deft handling of this issue is going to be needed. Now, why do I say deft handling? Because while India and Qatar have a good relationship, this situation is very complex and there are many strains on this otherwise good relationship between the two countries. So let me remind you, Qatar was the first country to object to Nupur Sharma's statement made on a TV show. Remember, Nupur Sharma is the now suspended BJP spokesperson, and Qatar had raised that issue. Qatar had even demanded an apology on it, and India had issued an apology along with the suspension of Nupur Sharma. So that was the first strain more recently. Now, the jailing of the 8 ex-Navy personnel is also going to put more strain on this relationship, because this has effectively blindsided New Delhi. They have 8 lakh citizens in Qatar, and there is going to be a question mark on the safety of all of them. And all of this is also happening amidst difference of opinion over the ongoing Israel and Gaza war. Now, Qatar, no surprises, is sympathetic towards Palestine, while India has condemned Hamas actions and supported Israel's right to defend itself. Now, in all of that complexity, not just in the bilateral relationship, in the views on international events, but in an increasingly divided world, what is it that India can do? After this death penalty for the ex-Navy officers, what are the options available? What is that India can do to save them? That's a big debate coming up.
This particular incident, which has been taken up very seriously by the MEA, will probably put some dent on our bilateral ties with Qatar. We all are aware that the nature of our cooperation or the nature of our existing relationship with Qatar has been a little bit shaky because of certain developments that have taken place in the last couple of years.
Hello, Moto.
Let's go across to our experts joining us. Ashok Sajjanhar is former Indian diplomat. Professor Asif Ramiz Daudi is a Middle East expert. Amitabh Sinha, senior lawyer, is also joining us. And I'm also joined with Swasti Rao, associate fellow of the MPIDSA. Swasti, let me begin with you. While nobody will accept it in clear terms, but there is a suspicion that this recent Israel conflict and India's very open stance supporting Israel's right to defend itself against a terrorist organization like Hamas may have something to do with this very strict penalty, a death penalty that has been awarded to 8 ex-Indian Navy officials. Would you say there is credence to this?
Well, a very good evening to you, Shivani, and a good evening to all the other panelists as well. To your question, if this has anything to do with India's stand on the current crisis in West Asia, I think this is not how the world of diplomacy really works. I mean, I would not rule it out completely. I would say that if I were to prepare a list of reasons as to what may have happened, because let's also understand that the kind of the kind of situation that is there is also pertaining to a very top, very highly secretive, submarine program.
Yes.
And I go into the details because for sure I don't cover Qatar directly, but I cover Europe, and I know that the Italians have been there in Qatar, and the midget submarine program, which is a highly secretive submarine program, has been in the offing for many years now, and it's a multi-billion-dollar program. And also understand that Qatar was one of the first countries in the Gulf to actually start acquiring submarines, because UAE and Saudi Arabia don't really have submarines right now. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it is also the very nature of the program that we are discussing that is extremely secretive. Understand that submarines, these submarines, the midget submarines, are military submarines, not just any submarines, and they also come with stealth capabilities, right? So because of this entire nature, which is extremely enigmatic and mysterious, it also lends a further complication to what was happening. Now, that said, we right now do not know as to what really were the charges on these former 8 Navy officers, right? So, I would be very careful in saying that they are treated the way they are treated because of what is going on in the Middle East.
Okay. No, but the reason why I asked you this question is also precisely this. We don't really know the nature of the charges. I understand they are related to national security and top secret military programs, and of course any government would take that very seriously. But with a friendly nation, you would possibly expect a little bit more dissemination of information and some sort of greater access to their citizens, especially those who have been ex-armed officials. So given that we don't really know much, and clearly New Delhi was surprised and shocked by this verdict, does that lend you to believe that maybe this is some sort of shadow boxing taking place?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very distasteful. I mean, I'm not at all disagreeing from the fact that it's extremely distasteful, and that is the reason behind India's official shock. Because if you look into the details of how these 8 officers, they are not just anybody; they are retired officers who have served in the Navy for at least 20 years. They were also instructors. They were picked up from their dwellings in the dead of the night. So all these things also indicate, at a very distasteful way, the entire thing has been carried out. So perhaps, somebody from the diplomatic services like Ambassador Sajjanahar would tell you the nitty gritty of what diplomacy should be, what kind of diplomacy should be expected or should be responded with. But as a common citizen, also, I mean, I'm extremely shocked at the way this entire thing has come. And then considering that Qatar has been one of the top LNG suppliers to India recently, so I mean, you don't really expect that. And in my opinion, I think that is something that we would take very, very seriously, regardless of whatever is happening in West Asia. But that is just not the way you would expect a modern state to behave with another friendly state. I mean, what is it, a Canada #2 or maybe worse than that? So this is something which is very, very bothersome, and I totally agree that we should really, rebut it in the strongest possible manner. Yeah.
Okay, let me also go across to Mr. Daudi. I want to understand from his perspective as well. How is he looking at it? Is there credence to the suspicion that this could have something to do with the Israel conflict as well? Or is this purely a military espionage, suspected spying activity matter, which the Qataris have taken very, very seriously? But in this case, as I said, they haven't really seemed to have kept their Indian counterparts in good stead or in proper light. So how do you read this situation, Professor Daudi?
Well, Shivani, what I have to say, there are speculations and different narratives. At the same time, there are perspectives. And everyone has his or her own rights to talk about that. I can't agree more with Dr. Swasti when she said that it has no connection with the, Israel and India's stand.
Okay.
When they say that India supports Israel and that's the reason they are going to do something of this sort. So there are many other aspects that one should understand before we comment on these sensitive and serious issues. When the international communities, different countries, they are having a proper eyes on this. You know why? Because India has emerged as one of the world leaders, and we know that if you have you give these kinds of a verdict against 8 ex-naval officers in a different country, then the consequences could be really the worst if they cannot prove it. So what I think that we should first try to understand what exactly is the verdict and what are the things that's happening between these two countries. I'm sure our government and Delhi and the MEA, they have been trying to get some sort of proper documentation, and they are working on finding a solution, but so far they are
Mr. Daudi, from what I did understand from what you're trying to say is that this will act as some sort of a problem as far as the Qatar-India relationship is concerned, this judgment of death penalty against 8 ex-Indian Navy officials, that this will sour the relationship?
I think, when you look at the word, it says, India says that we are shocked. It means that they expected something better and they are working on this. And when they are shocked, it means that there could be some sort of, relationship will be shaken. I'm sure about that. But the kind of relation that India shares with most of the Arab countries, especially with Qatar, more than 20%, 22% Indians live there, and we have trade and business as well. So here, Qatar also is aware that if they do something of this sort, where they can be the reasons of tarnishing the relations between these two countries, this is not good for the interest of that nation as well.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to clarify, that you do feel that on both sides there will be sensitivity as far as dealing with this matter. So far, the report suggests to us, and I do add that caveat, that even the Indian ministry is being very cagey about talking about this issue beyond a certain point. So let me go across to Ashok Sajjanahar. What do you read in the MEA's response, first of all, before I get to the Indian-Qatar relationship issue and what India can do diplomatically? What do you read in the MEA's statement?
Obviously, as one of, first of all, thank you very much, Shivani, for having me on your show.
Pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you. As your other panelists have said, I think this judgment that has come from the court of first instance in Qatar, it seems to have been very unexpected because I remember having watched what the official spokesperson of the ministry said just a few days ago that our ambassador and deputy ambassador, deputy chief of mission have met the eight officers in prison and on the 1st of this month, and on the 3rd of this month was the 7th and the last hearing, and then we are expecting a judgment any time. And then it was there was an air of hope and expectation that the verdict would be positive and would be helpful as far as these officers are concerned. So obviously, what has come has as the ministry has described it, it is shocked. The government of India is shocked, and it is something that we did not expect. So, the second part that I would like to, flowing from your comments and the comments of the two panelists also is that there is not much information that is available that's in the public domain. I'm not very certain whether the government of India is also not being, some of this information has not been shared with the government of India. I think, when the Minister of External Affairs says that I would not like to say much more on it because, it's confidential, or if the statement says that we don't want to speak much about it because it is confidential, then it does appear as if the government and the ministry is definitely aware definitely
Yeah,
more than what
absolutely.
is
They
available
seem to
in
know
the
more
public
than what
domain.
they're letting on. That's a given, absolute given, and they're also dealing with this matter with great sensitivity. So let me come to the other big question that most of our viewers would want to know, Ashok Sajjanhar. What is it truly diplomatically that India can do in such a scenario? Is there even a last case scenario where you can do some sort of a exchange? If it comes to that, is it going to be limited to provided legal, consular access and aid? Ultimately, we don't know which way the verdicts will go. Of course, they can appeal this verdict in a higher court. How do you see this at different stages?
Shivani, I think we'll have to approach this question on different simultaneously. One is, as the government has said, we'll study this judgment that it has come. We will appeal against it. We will take it to, after all, this is, as you mentioned yourself, this is the court of first instance. And, we have other possibilities of going in appeal to a different court, etc. Then, of course, the economic relations between the two countries, Qatar and India, are also very strong. We are very significant importers of gas from Qatar, and Qatar is one of the largest producers of gas. Of course, we know that once the Russian gas has gone out of the international market, there is a huge premium as far as gas is concerned, and they must be having a lot of buyers. But then India is one of the very large and significant purchasers of natural gas from Qatar, and that definitely works both ways, because if we are dependent on that, Qatar is also dependent on India for being a regular and a long-term customer. So I think that is also a relationship which we can leverage to our advantage. The last point here, in all these countries, since I have served in many of these countries in the Middle East, and the last court of appeal really is the head of state, which in this case is the Amir of Qatar. And the Amir of Qatar can definitely, on the basis of political considerations, can pardon, such sentences, normally which are done on the national day of the country, which is in December this year. So I think that what I'm suggesting is that all these tracks we'll have to work on them
simultaneously. No, so what you're suggesting also is, interestingly, that even if the legal case doesn't go quite the way that India would like it to go, where, let's say, the death sentence is commuted or lowered, or so far even not even bail was being given to these 8 ex-Navy officials, we can still hope to get maybe some of the a state intervention to release them, to pardon them, and to be able to bring them back home after sentence served or something like that. So that's an interesting aspect. And I'll come back to you, Ashok Sajjanhar. Let me also go across to Amitabh Sinha, who's a senior lawyer joining us. Amitabh Sinha, for you, What do you think are the legal options for India if, let's say, you exhaust all the options in Qatar? We've seen in Kulbhushan Jadhav's case, for example, we have gone to the International Court of Justice. Could India look at those options? When do those options come into play and how do they work?
Thank you, Shivani, for giving me a chance. But simultaneously, you have limited my scope only for the legal.
So you can make your other comments as well. I'm nobody to limit your scope. But if you could answer my question, then you can add your comments as well.
Yeah. No. So both are interlinked. Number one. See, Qatar is basically, in my eyes, it is a rogue country. And what Mr. Ashok ji or Mr. Swati, they are thinking, and I really appreciate Mr. Ashok's approach towards the entire crisis. But Qatar is basically a fundamentalist Islamic country which has Sharia law. And in Sharia law, they have announced it. It is not something which is hidden. That anybody who violates Sharia law will be punished, whether it is a national, Qatari national, or international citizen. So they have done nothing which is new. My point is that if they have done in such a blatant manner, and I think my fellow colleague, panelist, he was saying that Qatar and India has a very friendly relations. I don't disagree with that, but it is a one-way traffic. See, Qatar is basically an Islamic country, and Nupur Sharma case you have very rightly commented. But simultaneously, in FIFA World Cup, they have allowed or invited Zakir Naik, who is basically an anti-India and a fundamentalist person. And so after the protest, you forward most likely. So Qatar has shown its color in a very clear manner. And the most important thing that Qatar is basically now den for all the terrorist organizations, including Hamas. So because of that, only 18th of October, only few days back, US has sanctioned, announced sanction against Qatar just to violate, because they have violated, Gulf Cooperation Council terms and conditions. So this important thing should be kept in mind before taking any conclusion.
No, I'm not really drawing any conclusions. I do welcome the comment that you made on Qatar, but actually that fundamentally complicates the situation, because in this case, we do want some sort of a favorable response from Qatar. I'm not discounting anything that you're saying.
It is really a complicated situation. See, they are trying to twist the arm of India, and through India they are trying to persuade, like all democratic world of the world, like America and all this, league, which is supporting Israel's righteous.
So you're saying, contrary to what some of our other guests are saying, you're saying this is very much connected to India's stance on Israel, India's friendship with US and the Western world, and the Israel-Gaza conflict.
And US sanctioned on 18th of October. In my point of view, 18th October they have sanctioned. Imposed sanction upon Qatar because of relationship with Hamas. And now this verdict. So this is basically arm twisting. So in my point of view, Qatar should be handled with firm iron hands. Number one, International Court of Justice is an option. But my point is that in the relationship between Qatar and India, Qatar cannot demand, because we are the largest population country and the highest growing economy. So our consumption of Qatar produce is more beneficial for Qatar. That's why my point is that there should not be any, soft handling of this,
I understand that. And let me take that to Swasti as well. Swasti, I think what he's hinting at.
They are habitual in passing great sentences. During the FIFA World Cup, they had passed order for British nationals for, death sentence. So this is basically their typical fundamentalist Islamic Sharia law country, and they have made it very open. And lastly, I just want to suggest that the advisory should be issued against Qatar. Any Indian, if the Indians are visiting Qatar, there should be advisory that this point, the entire arrangement or entire effort should be like at their own risk. So this is my point of view.
Understand. Swasti, I do want you to weigh in on this. For those who may feel that this can be used as some sort of back-channel effort to get India to backtrack a little bit on its support or vociferous vocal support to Israel, and through India, as Mr. Amitabh Sinha seems to suspect, other countries as well. Do you anticipate that India is going to let those two issues collide in this case? Do you think the Indian diplomacy is going to be firm enough that the two cases are separate and, they're not going to compromise their stand on any other issue in this case?
But Shivani, I think India has already shown a considerable maturity when it came to the West Asian crisis right now. Because let's try to look at it through other dimensions. I mean, there is not just the fact that India has stood by the two-state solution to Israel and Palestine, and India has condemned the Hamas attacks like so many other countries, including the Italian. I mean, come on, you come to think of it. I mean, if you remember, I think Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni actually went all the way to meet Netanyahu and express a solidarity, and it is an Italian firm, which is Francateri, that is actually making all these submarines for them, which are extremely stealth and secretive, and they have an entire history. That is what I was trying to indicate in my first set of remarks, that you really need to understand as to what is the nature of this program that that we are discussing right away. It is not just anything and they picked it up somewhere like a low-hanging fruit to kind of ramp up pressure on India. Because going by that, I think the first thing they should do is that they should do something against Italy, or maybe some kind of an indirect thing towards those countries. So I am not very convinced that this is to ramp up some sort of a pressure, because I think India.
Can I just add one more thing? Maybe in the Nupur Sharma case, there was criticism of the Indian government. I wouldn't use the word capitulate, although some would. But there was criticism that we succumbed to the pressure on a matter which was not that big, and issued an apology, etc., predominantly on Qatar's behest or because of Qatari pressure. So there's a precedent to this, and some people may use that to say that, okay, they've got a taste of this once, and who's to say they will not try this again?
So, see, Shivani, like I said, that since we do not have enough information to discuss the different threats that are there, I think all we are doing is speculating. I honestly would not be able to reject or accept a theory based on purely speculation. Well, I mean, if you ask me, there could be a possibility.
You are following the speculations when you are talking about the Italian submarines and all. What you are talking about? You are in one hand you are talking about speculation. In other hand you are not talking about the speculation.
Okay, I understand. Amitabh Sir, let us finish very quickly. I'll come to you, Mr. Dawoodi. Just please be patient for a minute. Yes, Swasti, finish, please.
Yeah. So basically, I think the only point that I'm trying to make is that apart from all the emotional appeals, like I said, that it is absolutely horrendous, the way these people have been picked up, and these are officers. And of course, I think India is going to take the strongest possible measure. They are first going to, I mean, we don't know the details yet, but I guess there is a way to first appeal within the judicial system in Qatar, and if they are not followed properly, you can go to International Court of Justice, but nothing is going to help as much as the back channel diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What I think the Indian government is doing. So
that is exactly where the Indian government or the present dispensation led by Narendra Modi and S. Shankar has been very successful too, especially in the Middle East as well. But once again, I just want to quickly go across to Ashok Sajjanha to understand this, sir, because you have served in some of these countries. Now, their courts, Amitabh Sinha obviously has a point when he talks about Islamic Sharia law and the way that they treat certain issues versus how the rest of the world may treat. That's a separate issue. But some of these courts in countries like Qatar can be very opaque. It's a very opaque functioning, and you don't really know, where to get the proper information or how to get the proper information, or whether you will even get all the details. Could you just elaborate a little bit about the functioning of the courts there? Ashok Sajjanhar. Mr. Sajjanhar, can you hear me? It looks like we've lost.
In Sharia law, there is no scope for any type of consideration. What they think is right. So if somebody is expecting something, liberal will come from their Sharia law courts, I think it is improper. And
no, I'm not quite asking for something liberal. Let's not confuse liberal, modern, Western here. I'm just saying, what are their laws really? What is the scope as far as their legal system is concerned is all that we can look for.
I should intervene.
They will only listen to the pressure.
You should allow me to
Okay,
speak,
yes, Mr. Dawoodi, please go ahead. Could you answer that question? Is the functioning of courts in some of these countries too opaque to get a real sense of justice? Mr. Dawoodi.
Look, I tell you about this. I've been here in this region for 22 years, and I am aware of a few things about Sharia law. I don't want to comment much on that, but just one thing I want to highlight here. When someone talks about Sharia law, and when he says that there is no scope of anything, there is one thing, that is forgiveness. Okay, they give permission to them. If someone who wants to forgive someone, it's finished. The case ends there. Now, that's not my point.
No, but
My
sir,
point here
a case
is,
like espionage where you have foreign nationals involved cannot be just decided on that. What I'm trying to understand is what is the
that's why I'm
process of
saying,
putting in a prosecution versus a defense? What is the defense allowed to any individual, Qatari or otherwise, when they are implicated in a case like this? That's the sense that I'm trying to get. We'll try and get Mr. Ashok Sajjanar also. Sir, stay with me for a few minutes. Let Mr. Daudi finish. Yes. Mr. Daudi, go ahead.
yeah. So what I was saying, like, one point that I want to mention here, when someone, especially you say that someone is a lawyer, for example, Mr. Sinha, co-panelist, is here, and he wants to believe mostly in speculations. Okay.
No, so
The
forget
merit
that.
of
Answer my
case-
question. I have limited time. Mr. Daudi, answer my question. What is the defense allowed to individuals, in this case, the ex-Navy officials from India, to present their case? Is a defense allowed?
Yes, these things are allowed everywhere. It's like every other country. When you have courts there in India, you have courts there in the Middle Eastern countries, they have their lawyers, and here we have consular access as well. So I think, in general, I don't know anything in particular about this case in particular, but
Why they will
generally,
not-
Mr. Sinha, not like this. Mr. Sinha, not like this, please. Yes, Mr. Daudi.
look, in general, when there are hearings, they are given proper space, and the lawyers, they defend their case, and it's something like, what we have in India and other countries. So we
Okay.
should not mix this up with the system where we say that it's Sharia, and there we have democracy, we have this on that. The general perspective and the general principle concept is the same.
The general concept is the same. Well, that's all that one can hope for, that there should be access to both legal proceedings and judicial proceedings, and there should be a semblance of justice where you can present your case, the best defense possible for your case. I'm not sure if Ashok Sajjanar is back with us, but seemingly he's facing some video issues. We can actually, if the video is not clear, it's okay, let's just keep his audio on. Ashok Sajjanar, the question I was trying to understand from you, the answer was, the question is, how opaque or how easy, how transparent is the functioning of courts and the legal system in some of these countries?
It is not transparent at all, Shivani. I think most of the cases, and particularly, this one, which is to deal with
National security.
National security, espionage, etc. Then, it's going to be very, very opaque. There's hardly going to be any information that is going to be available. That's why you would have seen that, we asked for bail for our officers and the sailor. Bail was not granted. They were even put in solitary confinement. And you mentioned yourself that the Omanian officer who was, heading this Dahra company, he was let off after 2 months, but they have been in custody from 30th of August last year, and they have now been pronounced this judgment of death penalty.
Death penalty, yes.
So, so to come to your question, it is very opaque, and really it is, not like the what we have in the Indian Penal Code and the Criminal Code, etc., etc.
So there could be a difficulty in getting a true sense of justice, is my question. And therefore,
Yes,
we will
absolutely.
have to depend more on diplomacy and not just on legalities, isn't it?
Yeah, more on diplomacy and on the political connections, because that is what really works in these countries, because it is, all power rests in the top leadership. That is the fount of all power and all authority. And I have been in some of these, absolutely centrally administered countries, and ministers don't count for anything. Their institutions are very fragile, very vulnerable, very weak. They don't really, whether it is the Election Commission or the Supreme Court or any of these matters, they don't really have much authority or much power. all power rests in the, in the chief executive,
Yes.
which in the case is Amir. And that is why I had mentioned that, if we really want to get positive results as far as we are concerned, we continue to work on the other aspects also, like Mr. Sinha said, ICJ, we explore all the legal provisions also, the legal possibilities also.
Okay.
But ultimately what I feel is it is approach to the Amir and
Yeah,
to
so,
the highest
so it's
office.
important to understand what you're dealing with. That's what I was trying to understand. What is this? What is a country that we're dealing with? What is a system that we're dealing with? And therefore, you have to come at the best options in front of you. And in this case, as our guests are explaining, it could well be back-channel diplomacy and not much more than that. And therefore, the suspicion arises whether this could be used as some sort of arm twisting. And of course, there's not much we can say on that because there's nothing really out in the open. But we do hope that there is some success, some breakthrough achieved as far as this case is concerned. I do thank all of our guests for joining us.